Today, Pragg Ramesh Babu shocked the world. He played an opening that by move 7 has only been reached one time. That is insane. So if you play a dubious opening, if you play the Owens, the King's Gambit, anything, and someone's like, you don't know how to play chess, you tell them in the FIDE candidates, something worse was deployed successfully. There were 3 draws today, and Pragg versus Vidit is a decisive game. Let's get into it. We get e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Now you're thinking, this is just going to be a Spanish. Wrong, you are. We get a6 and f5. This is the deferred Schliemann. So f5 would be the Schliemann. Say bishop b5, f5. This would be the Schliemann. Weird word. But f5 is the deferred version or delayed version. Basically, the ideas are similar to that of a King's Gambit or let's say a Vienna, right? Knight on c6 first, and then you get e5, f5. The point of this is to destabilize white's center. So if takes, d5, you can win the pawn back, you get full control of the center, you get everything you want. This position has been reached 7 times, and after the move d4, common again in the King's Gambit, destabilizing both of each other's centers. I'm actually going to show a line in the King's Gambit to show how similar this is. We get e takes d4 and e5. That's the whole point. White gambited a pawn back because now knight f6 cannot be played because the move e5 stops the move knight to f6. Logical. We get b5 kicking out the bishop, and now knight a5. It is move 7, and this has only been reached one time in the whole database of chess. Not even on Lichess. This hasn't been reached on a Lichess database after the next move. That is insane. You can mouse slip into this position. Knight a5, aiming at the bishop. We get knight takes d4, the best move. And by the way, disregard the computer evaluation, because 1, who likes the engine? Nobody. And 2, it doesn't even know what it's talking about. After a while, it goes up and down and doesn't even know. Bishop to b7, and now we get knight takes f5. Picking up another pawn, and the only move here ever played was pawn to g6. However, that is a bad move. So, a novelty and the best move, pawn to d6. This has never been played before. It is the only move to keep the game in the balance. And here, Vidit plays queen to e2, a discovery on the king. That does not matter, though. To Pragg, he plays queen to 7 well within his prep. Reason being, you might be like, that is a discovered check. And yes, but like in the King's Gambit, king to f7, the king is safe. You're going to develop knight to f6. There's no check here on h5. The rook can go to e8. The queen can get pinned, as in many King's Gambit traps. I'll show those at the end of the video. They're in my King's Gambit series if you want to check them out. I love dubious openings. I just cannot believe he played this in the candidates. That is unreal. That's unreal. So we get e6, keeping the pawn. It is 2 away from promoting. It gains a tempo on the queen, but now we get queen c6. So now all of a sudden the position's about to start making sense. Of course, Vidit does not castle. Do you see why? Queen takes g2, the famous generic chess.com puzzle, battery checkmate. So after queen c6, we get bishop g5. It's like, okay, I'm going to stop you from castling, right? But we get g6 kicking out the knight, h6 kicking out the bishop. Though this pawn structure is weak because there's no f-pawn guarding it, white essentially just moved backwards in the position for 2 moves in a row, and that makes black feel pretty safe. Knight to e7, he's developing his king side. Forgot which famous player it was. Was it Lasker? Steinitz? One of the greats said blockade past pawns at all costs. That is what he's doing. c4. This is a position where black can castle king or queen side, likely queen side in the later game, so you don't want them to blow open the c-file. So what does he do? He locks the queen side. Logical. We got queen to g4. This knight cannot move, though it would never move. It's aiming at weak squares. It's still protecting the pawn. Asking questions. We get queen to c5, blockading the queen side furthermore because maybe black wants to castle on the queen side. I'm sure there was deeper meaning to the move, but at surface level, that is what it does. Bishop to g7. Now, as you could see, we have a couple sniper rifles. And white is only up a pawn for all of this. We got the bishop pair, and they're both feasting on some long diagonals. Pragg castles, and here Vidit missed his one opportunity to create some complications on his side. The move is knight to d5. The point of knight d5 is that you're trying to unblock the e7 square so that potentially there could be discoveries. And the knight has to take, otherwise white will take the knight. And after you take, there is the move e7 check. The computer doesn't know what's going on. You have to play rook to d7. Now you're all pinned. And then there is the move knight to e4, gaining a tempo on the queen. If the queen moves, you take the knight. So here, Pragg would have been in trouble. He's pinned. The pawn is one away from promoting. But keep in mind, Vidit has burned through so much clock time because no one looks at this. Why would you ever look at this? This isn't even a blitz opening. This is like a hyper bullet opening. So he plays h4. I'd be a little cautious of this move just because it looks very scary, right? Pragg's probably going to pry open with g5 eventually, but h4 creates some room for his bishop, creates some room for his king, and stops the move g5 or temporarily delays it. Pragg blockades the e-pawn furthermore and now picks up a pawn. He picks up another pawn. So now not only is black up a pawn, his bishops are wide open. It is a wide open position. And not only does that favor the bishop pair, it favors the guy who's up, who has double your time, right? Vidit has 16 minutes to make 17 moves in this position. Crazy. e7, a discovery check. We get king to b8 and bishop to e3, gaining a tempo on the queen. Queen to b5, Pragg does not blunder his queen luckily, and now knight c4. So Vidit is creating complications here. Granted, of course he is. He's a very good super GM. And now bishop to d4. Pragg has to be careful. The reason you cannot take the knight, right? You might be like, oh, the bishop can't take the rook because then I win the queen. Except that it works in reverse when your king is on a dark square, right? Discovered check attack. Pragg would lose a queen and then the game. That would be tragic. That would ruin this gem of a game. So he finds the best move, rook to g8, and then picks up the bishop. That is a passer. You cannot take b3 because your king is on the b file, but you're protecting your g pawn. You're going to collect the e pawn, and then you have the bishop aiming at g2. So the position simplifies a little bit. Here, we should have gotten knight takes b7, but keep in mind, Vidit now has 4 minutes to make 10 moves. Very hard to play perfect chess. So he goes b4, stabilizing his knight on a5. And now, keep in mind, this is so rude to do. This pawn on g6 goes to g5, goes to g4, goes to g3. And now Pragg has a winning position. Passed pawns, not even passed pawns. Pawns are fast in the endgame, especially when they're pawns in front of your king and there's two centralized rooks that are going to aim at your king. So the point of this move is if Vidit were to take it, backwards queen check, queen b6. If the king moves over to the h file, rook takes h5 is mate in 1. And it would be mate regardless. If the king comes to f1, there's rook f8 check. Laterally, you're not doing too hot. Diagonally, you're doing even worse. So things are bad. Things are bad. We get knight takes bishop, pawn takes, a Zwischenstück in between move, and then queen takes knight. Now it is a major piece endgame. Pragg is up a pawn though. He's about to be up 2 pawns. Little Vidit could do. And keep in mind, he hasn't made time control. He still needs to make 3 more moves. So he goes queen f3, trying to simplify further. And this move is insane. Like, to not even just go into the endgame, to double up rooks and aim at g2. He's a perfectionist. He is a perfectionist indeed. So we get this major piece endgame. It could be scary if Vidit creates a passed h-pawn, but that is too unrealistic. Vidit picks up the pawn, but then he loses the h-pawn. He evades the rook trade because you don't want to go into a 1-rook endgame when you're down 2 pawns. That is theoretically lost on every level. So he's avoiding the rook trade until he can no longer avoid it. He reached time control, but was already in a losing position. He resigned in this position because after king g2, rook g5, we get a rook trade, and Pragg can convert this in his sleep. He actually, with his eyes closed, blindfold chess, he's a beast. He can. I watched a video where someone just says where the pieces are in a super complex position, and he just solves the puzzles in his head. So talented. So this was one of the craziest Super GM games I've seen in a while. I do think Fabi's going to win from my prediction video, but Pragg wins. 1.5 points. That is great. He comes back from yesterday. He's showing he has out of the box prep for this tournament, and I respect the fact that he's really going for a win, especially when he hasn't been able to convert in the past. He's going for wins. He's coming to win. He's coming for the World Championship title. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching. A crazy game.